And welcome back. Today we are going to talk about a project that I like to call the circle gets the square. Now with this project we are dealing with movement, we are dealing with rhythm, and somewhat with pattern. What we're going to do is we are going to use either a circle shape or a square shape, and we are going to try and show some type of movement on the page, whether it starts in the middle and works its way out, or if we have some type of kind of wave going across the page, or a spiral of some sort. And we're going to look at all different types of versions of those here momentarily. So the examples that I have here are slightly different than the way that the project is going to end up. These is a previous version of it, but we'll talk about that at the end of the video here. So with this one, we have the movement is starting in the center of the page and it's working its way out. And with this one, it is emphasized with having darker shapes in the middle, and then as it goes out, the shapes get bigger as well as getting lighter. So there's different ways that we can show this movement, and we can have the emphasis be on the movement of the shapes that are moving themselves. So that's what's going on here with this one. With this similar deal, where instead of it being kind of all around with these very specific lines coming from the corners of each side of the page, and those are darker than the rest of it, and they get smaller on the outside and they get bigger working their way in towards the middle. With this one here, we've got kind of all the squares starting in the corner, and it kind of tumbles out and around this way. With squares, you can use the rotation of the square to help show the movement. It's a little trickier with the circle, but that's kind of how this one is working out here. And this kind of looks like a screensaver where you've got the dot moving across the page where they are overlapped. And we do want to deal with solid shapes. So if you have something that's going to overlap, you're not going to see the other part of it. It's just going to be completely behind this one, or the shape in front of it. Here we've got our movement going diagonally across the page, and it kind of starts out here with the shapes being very much dark, and then it gets lighter as it trickles across the page. This particular one, they didn't fill the entirety of the page, and it works. You can have some open space in between your shapes or on the page itself, but you don't want it to be the majority. It needs to be, I would say, no more than a quarter of the page. And this one here, if we were to kind of take this, slide it over, it would be right at a quarter of the page, and that's kind of the max that we want to have. All right, we've got some more squares here blowing out from the center. And this one is not as noticeable as the others, but we can kind of see the shapes get larger as we go across the page. And we're using a size change to help show the movement in most of the cases. So here, again, we start out really small, we get really big as we go across the page. And get one more here so we can get some circles in here as well. So with this one, it's kind of, the movement is from the outside and it kind of works its way in towards the center. So you can look at it as the circles moving in towards the center, or if you look at it this way, it's the squares pushing in from the side. So you can have however you decide to show it. You can have a little bit of variety on that. So when we go to get started with this, we want to kind of think about how we want our movement to take place. And is it going to be diagonally across the page? Is it going to be kind of a swirl? Is it going to be a big wave? So when you figure out how you want that to happen, we're just going to draw a very light line, just so that way you can kind of see the pathway of where it's going to be. And you can see it's so light that we can't even see it up close, barely. Okay, and ultimately we don't want to see that at all, so it's just going to be kind of there. All right, now the next step is, in the classroom, we are going to use these templates. Either they have squares on them or they have circles on them. And we're going to use a variety of these. Good rule of thumb is we don't generally want to use anything on the bottom row as far as the small. Maybe out here towards the end, you say if your pencil can fit through it, it's too small. So we're getting over here. So that's that one there. Same with the squares. And then we're putting circle into a square, so it's going to give us a little more options. But we don't want to get too small, because then it starts to get to be where you fill up too much of the page. If you're doing a very specific section where you want it to be really nice and tight, we can do that So after you've got your line drawn out, then what you're going to do is we're going to decide whatever shapes you're going to use, and I'm going to use circles. Now if you're at home and you don't have a template, that's fine. Find some shapes that you have around the house that are going to be clean on your page. A marker cap, a cap to a small bottle, coins would probably work the easiest because you've got a variety of things. Even if you've got all the way up to a 50-cent piece, that would work out well. So you go dimes, nickels, dimes, pennies, nickels, quarters, 50 cent. That would give you all the things that you need for this. So I'm going to start out here, and I'm going to start really big on this side, and then I want it to go and be small over onto the other side. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to start light and just work my way through and have it be a couple rows. So we're kind of going to the left and to the right here, kind of stagger my shapes across the page. And this particular one, I'm just going to go step down one circle as I go into each one. You want to get those little guys like that. Ooh. We'll fix that later. If you make sure that you've got little sections like that, I probably should overlap those, but let's do that right now. We'll just come over here and we'll just put another one in there, and that'll be one behind it. And just work your way across the page to get that initial section laid out of where things are going to go. And then as you go through, get all that done, you'll end up with something like this. So this is my initial movement, and now I'm going to go in and kind of fill in. I'm going to stay somewhat big here and then kind of taper down to small, and over here it's going to go from this big, it's going to go down to small. So I'm going to have, and that's going to emphasize that wave going through kind of the center and bottom of the page. Now this is where things change in regards to what all of my examples were. So how we're going to do this that's going to be different is that we're going to kind of select a handful of these shapes to shade them and to try to make them look three-dimensional, similar to the color wheel sphere project that we did. And what that's going to do is that's going to kind of emphasize that movement even more, because it's going to darken them, but it's also going to help make these things look, a little bit round. And then we're going to go from, in this particular case, I'm going to go from light on my big shapes, and I'm going to get darker on the smaller shapes. So that's going to, not only is it going to give me work with value, but having the smaller ones be darker, it's going to make them appear like they're further away, so they're going back in space. All right, so I'm going to start with over here with my light lines. Now with the outline, they can stay there, that's fine. And we're just going to kind of come through and shade these. It doesn't have to be as precise as with the other ones. In each one, we kind of want to have a little bit of a highlight, but it's not going to be as big as it was with the sphere. Now I think what I'm going to do for this project is, on the tables, I'm going to have a blending stump. And what a blending stump is it allows you to kind of shade and to smooth out all of your shading in here. Now with the way the blending stump works though, it needs to have material to work with. So if you don't have a whole lot of material on the page, it's not going to move that pencil around. So the whole point of having a blending stump is to allow you to shade with material. So I've got a little bit over here where I didn't have some, but I'm just making it very, very, very light. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come over here to the next one and do the same thing. It'll be a little bit darker. This is probably a little bit on the dark side for where I want this to start out, but we'll work with that. Now we want our light source to kind of be in the same place all the way through. So just gonna lay this out here, and I'm gonna have to go back into this to put more material down. But as you go, you can kind of see how that if you've had stuff that was here that you erased, it's gonna show up. So we want to be cautious about that. You can see how I can stretch this out a little tiny bit, but not a whole lot. All right, and you come in, kind of touch up my lines, and then we're gonna do this, we're gonna go all the way through. And then at the end of this, I will put up a still of the final version. So when we do this, like I said, we wanna have the majority of the page covered. If you have a little bit showing through, that's fine. But we want most of the page to be covered. So good luck and happy drawing.